Hey guys, Board now back with you. On this video I will be reviewing the 17th episode of the X-Files first season. It is called E.B.E. and I was confident I was on to a bit of a winner with this one early on when I said Morgan and James Wong, two of the best writers on the show, and they've been involved in many of the great episodes, so I was confident it would be a strong episode, and I wasn't disappointed. It's a really good episode and one of the best of the first season, and sets the path moving forward for the X-Files in terms of the type of show it's going to be in the coming season. I think it definitely returns to some things which had already been set up earlier in this first season, which is obviously a good sign of good writing to pay off these themes. So definitely it's UFO centered, this plot, and it does return to some of the things that's set up earlier in the season when it comes to UFO. If you think about the very sort of first few episodes, so stuff we saw in the pilot, stuff we saw in the second episode, Deep Throat, etc., some of that is returned to here and sort of built on. So it does a great job of continuing that mythology. And as I said, it definitely, in terms of certain things like the character of Deep Throat who appears in this episode, he's definitely built up more this episode, the sort of character he is, and more to do with his background. There's a really good explanation actually in this episode to why he chose Mulder, why he reached out to him and became his informant essentially. So I'll talk more about that as I get into it. Obviously, I'm going to go into full spoilers, so just a warning in case you haven't seen the episode. The premise of the episode is that it opens with a weird-looking object being shot down by like a fighter pilot. We then sort of switch to the United States, where there's all these reports of objects being spotted in the sky, so UFO style objects, and we see a truck driver, sort of driving down the motorway, and he's listening to sightings on the radio, all this sort of hysteria is surrounding these supposed sightings. His truck then randomly stops, like the electricity is shut off, there's like crackling going on, so there's this whole atmosphere that suggests there might be a UFO in the area or something happening. Sees a random object in the sky which appears to be the same thing everyone else is seeing. He then shoots at it and he's arrested, and he then becomes the sort of in point for Mulder and Scully because they come to investigate. They start to interview him. He appears to be unwell, that they sort of question why that could be. Scully has a theory that it has to do with Gulf War syndrome because apparently he served in the Gulf War. And they also find that his story that he's given to them has inconsistencies, and it appears as though his statement that he's given to Mulder and Scully doesn't match the statement he originally gave. It appears as though he suddenly can't remember exactly the details of what he saw, and he wants to be released, and the local police sort of step in, and your vehicle's been tracked, you're free to go. And when Scully tries to question it because they haven't finished interviewing the guy, just go basically is his words. So then what happens is Mulder and Scully later find out that they are being bugged. Scully finds a bug in her pen, and that the government, it appears, or someone at least, is bugging them. And so the two halves of the plot, if you like, tie up, and we get the introduction of the lone gunman in this episode. They become important later on in the episode. And we get Deep Throat involved as well. He has crucial information about this whole plot to do with the trucker and the UFOs and all the rest of it. So that's the basic premise. As I said, it's a really good episode. I think this episode kind of sums up everything that's great about the X-Files as a show. Paranoia, that sort of mystery and intrigue. It's got a really good atmosphere. Visually, it's very striking at the end. Just to jump forward to the end of the episode, with Mulder and Deep Throat, and they've just come out of a base, and Deep Throat essentially walks off into like the fog or like the shadows, and it's very cinematic, something out of like film noir. Much good stuff with the characters in this episode, so much like mystery and intrigue. It's the episode really where Deep Throat comes into his own as a character. As I said, there's a motivation that he gives for reaching out to Mulder, but at this point it's sort of worth remembering that Scully still doesn't know about the existence of Deep Throat. I think in a previous episode, Mulder might have hinted that he has a source from within the FBI, but hasn't really given it away to Scully who it is. Mulder keeps his identity a secret in this, even to Scully, which I think sort of sells how much Mulder trusts Deep Throat and how, I guess, just how much of a matter of pride it is to him that he doesn't give away a source, even to someone he trusts as much as Scully. Deep into like characters like Deep Throat and the whole conspiracy theory, and I think it highlights why the X-Files as a show is just so well crafted and just so rich and full of mystery, because it doesn't really take the easy answers. It sort of, when it's working to its best like this, it presents, credible arguments all over the place, and question marks and shades of grey with Deep Throat in this, because there's times when you're definitely led to believe, well, this guy is on Mulder's side, and he is ultimately a sympathetic good character, but then there's things that'll come out that'll make you question that. This is the Deep Throat we've probably wanted from the start, and it makes the character make sense to an episodes in this season where he's just felt like he's there to read out like the plot sort of thing, or just a little bit more of an assurance. Need him in the episode. Mulder and Scully are on good form in this episode. I really like the back and forth that come to the scene of what happened with the trucker, and Scully just reading out all these explanations for what the trucker saw. Like, he's looking down on the ground and he's like examining it, not even looking at Scully. And every time she comes up with another one, he just deadpans, possibly, or it's rational, or feasible, I think it was. But it's really good stuff. It's classic Mulder, because later on in the episode it sort of flips around when she is up, and it's when Deep Throat offers them a crucial bit of the puzzle where because it's all to do with like this government, offers up Mulder a photograph that seems to be a soldier looking at a UFO, essentially. That seems to confirm that there is some value to all this. He immediately says that then it's a fake, and obviously Mulder's very defensive of Deep Throat, where she says, I've never seen anyone with as much passion as you about something like this, but sometimes that passion will blind you to the truth, like you're too close to this, which is obviously something which is a credible thing to be saying, and it's definitely something we've seen with Mulder. It's consistent in his character when you look at some of the things with his sister. He is legitimate in his passion and his concerns, which is why we engage in him so much as a character. Sometimes if you are too invested, too passionate, then it's hard to have that, objection, or that subjection, I guess is the word I'm looking for as well. But later on, she also says it's that passion which then can be exploited by people. It's easier sometimes to be exploited when you see someone with that passion and someone who's looking for the truth. So it's this brilliant rational argument from Scully that sometimes looking for it so much you just want to believe, this is photographic evidence. Because immediately Mulder does get quite defensive. It's to like 2 or 3 reasons why it's basically a fake photograph, and Mulder immediately gets his back up and says, no, you just don't want to believe, sort of thing. And again, I think this episode reinforced the bond between Mulder and Scully. Mulder first gets like the tip off from Deep Throat and like skeptical of this guy and can he be trusted. But Scully says there's only one person I really trust, and it's you, Mulder. So in a way, that's her way, at least at this point, of saying, if you trust this guy, then that's good enough for me. So I thought that was quite striking, because Mulder actually gets the photograph checked out and in the lab, and he actually finds out then it is a fake. And Scully, there's a couple of other developments that lead Scully to maybe believe that this is legit, the UFO is legit, and various things. So, but then it's Mulder pulling back and sort of saying, no, it's actually a hoax because of these reasons. So we get to a crucial moment later on in the episode where they decide to track the truck. Track the truck, there you go. But yeah, because what happens is Scully finds out then there was added weight. I'm doing it again. Weight added to the truck while the driver had been pulled over. The actor who plays the driver, by the way, I've seen in lots of stuff. He's one of those character actors. He pops up everywhere. He lied about being in the Gulf War. He lied about his name. He lied about a bunch of things. So that's all very suspicious. But Mulder's whole theory is that something happened overnight before they arrived and before they got to question him, and that he was somehow sort of brainwashed, and that's why he seemed a different person and wasn't so forthcoming when they arrived. Because of this, Mulder sort of suspects that he's now transporting this equipment, essentially this UFO equipment for the government. So they decide to put a track on it and they follow it, and this is the stuff where the level of detail is sort of really good, because they obviously find out being tracked, they're being bugged by the government, so they find out is a fake. Kind of puts the kibosh on them trusting Deep Throat at this point, in secret at places at one point just at night outside the FBI, or outside the White House, I think it is. But at one point they meet in an aquarium. When Mulder challenges Deep Throat on his lie on the pictures being fake, information about the truck driver, the file he gave him, and the whole information about the background to do with this UFO fighter pilot stuff, then that was real, but that the picture was fake. And he says them that fake information so that they would then follow up on it, but so that it would distract them, as a way to protect them. And he comes out with this logic, then the best lie or the best truth is the one that's surrounded by 2 lies. And it's a great scene. He has this very sort of credible sort of logic, even though you're questioning him and he did lie to them. And So I think this is a really good episode for Deep Throat in bringing him into the focus. By as good, he's on their side, but this episode does a really good job in like muddling that. Mulder is sort of suspicious of Deep Throat, so they go their own way. They decide to follow the trucker, but there's this brilliant level of detail that just has that feel of like conspiracy theory, paranoia, sort of almost like a 1970s like political thriller. When Scully comes over to the apartment, Mulder has found a bug in, I can't remember where it is, I think it's in like a plug socket. Yeah, it's a plug socket. So when she comes in, he puts on an act, it's best that we drop this case for the benefit of the people listening into conversation. But then he writes a note that says we must find the trucker, sort of thing. So convince the people listening in, then they're dropping the investigation. Then travel to the location where they're going to follow the trucker separately, and they do it all covertly. Like Scully goes by plane. I think she makes a point of paying by cash, so that like maybe her card can't be sort of tracked. And Mulder goes by road, so they go by different modes of transportation. It gets to this point later on in the episode where they follow the truck and the truck randomly stops and there's a big flash, and detail is then like time stops kind of thing, or at least it's supposed to. So they're bringing that back. Is that they go into the back of the truck and they see this whole area, this UFO equipment, and it's supposed to be like this holding chamber sort of thing, and they can't find the driver anywhere. So their original thought is he's been transported, he's been picked up, sort of thing. So he's been essentially abducted. But what I was saying earlier about Scully is she at this point is convinced that what's just happened is a UFO abduction. Mulder calls it a hoax. He points to the watches. Look, they didn't stop, sort of thing. Time has continued. It's actually Scully who wants to believe in the moment, and it's actually Mulder who takes a step back and says, no, it's a hoax. And he sort of questions everything, and he says they're putting on the show for them. They're putting on a show so that if we think it's a hoax, sort of thing, and there's been no UFO activity, then we'll just drop it. At various times, Mulder and Scully sort of switch their sort of beliefs in this episode, and it sort of makes you believe in both characters. It sort of points to their credibility that Scully is open-minded if she sees the evidence, and likewise Mulder won't just be taken in by every hint of UFO activity and things, and that he will consider other possibilities if he sees evidence that, hey, this could be a hoax. The lone gunmen, who I'll talk about in a moment, they serve their big purpose in the episode because they actually get Mulder and Scully into the base, into like the government base, where they believe this equipment is being. They print them off basically fake IDs so that they can get like clearance into the base. They're trying to basically sneak into like the room where that they suspect that this stuff is going on, this stuff is stored, and guard sort of suspects them. So Scully doesn't come clean about why they're there, but she reveals that they're FBI agents, and that comes up with a cover story that they're there to investigate, quite work with the guard. Even though they're FBI agents, he still smells a rat, so he like radios someone, and that's when Mulder decides to peel off it and do a runner and run towards like the basement, the room, and Deep Throat makes the save. He actually shows up and not exactly vouches for Mulder, but he says it's okay, I've got this under control to the guard. So this is actually a big gesture for Deep Throat, the fact that he actually saves Mulder at this point, because if not for Deep Throat stepping in, Mulder would have been arrested and all the rest of it. Says there's no point in taking this any further, Mulder, because the alien, what was in that room, has been killed anyway and disposed of. So then he tells Mulder about the history. He tells post like the Cold War, governments from all over the world, like, then it would be in the world's best interests of aliens, UFOs were kept secret. So an agreement was made. Then if an alien was found that would be killed, it would be shot and disposed of, and it would be covered up, its existence, for the protection of the world. So Deep Throat tells this story of how he essentially did this. He shot an alien, he disposed of an alien, and that he's one of only 3 men around the world to have done that. But he regrets about that. He had regrets about concealing this important information and what he actually did. That's why he reached out to Mulder. That's his mistake, and that's why he reached out to Mulder. That's why Mulder is the person who one day revealed the truth. It's that Deep Throat in this episode is helping Mulder, but he's helping him in a way that protects Mulder. So it's almost this idea of there are some battles you can win and some battles you can't win. And in a way, he's telling Mulder, this is one battle you can't win. I think there's this interesting idea with Deep Throat in this episode that Mulder is someone who is almost like a son to him. It's like he sees himself in Mulder. He sees this opportunity for Mulder because obviously Deep Throat's quite an elderly sort of character at this point, and in some ways I think he sees himself as making redemption, but through Mulder. Jerry Hatter as Deep Throat really comes into his own. Hatter as an actor really gives this stuff great sort of weight. And it's because of that performance and because of the dialogue and just some of the details of the plot and what he claims that makes you think, oh, okay, maybe this guy can be trusted after all, having had his character questioned earlier in the episode. This is a real turning point for the X-Files, for the direction it's going to go in the coming seasons. At its best, Lone Gunman for a moment, because these 3 characters are introduced and they of course will get their own spin-off later on. It didn't last long, I think like 2 seasons, but I will say then I've never seen any of the Lone Gunmen, the 2 seasons they got, but I will review it later on. But anyway, these 3 characters who are very similar to Mulder, they believe in UFOs, they believe in conspiracy theories. I think less classy versions of Mulder is a good way to put it, but these characters who believe in the same stuff as Mulder, and I guess because they're outside sources, outside of the government, in some ways, certainly for Mulder, it sort of lends them more credibility, who run their sort of own cult-like magazine that deals in UFO and other sort of conspiracies. So, long introduction in this episode, because Mulder and Scully first go to them so that they can investigate Gulf War syndrome, which Scully has the belief than the driver might have. But in a way, that scene is mostly to introduce them as characters, sort of have their own distinct personalities in some ways. I mean, you've got Frody, who's sort of more like the old hippie of the group, the old sort of rocker who takes a shine to Scully, and that becomes sort of a recurring thing we return to. And it's sort of funny how at one point he says she's beautiful, and then when when they give her like a conspiracy theory and she rejects it with sort of rationality, he's like, oh, she's beautiful. It's really sort of funny. Byers, who's the more slightly straight-laced sort of grounded one, and Lanley, of course, which is sort of a government type name, but Lanley, yeah, the guy who was in Wayne's World, funnily enough, which is pretty funny. But yeah, when they first come in, he sort of has this thing about how he had breakfast with the guy who killed JFK. So the scene is when they start talking. One of government are always like tracking you, and how they do it through the money, a £20 or a $20 note to Scully, and so she gives him one, and he rips off the end, and he pulls out this device, well, not device, but this strip, and he says, see, this strip is used to keep tabs on you. It's a bug, essentially. Scully comes back with, well, it's a counterfeit sort of strip to prove that money is real. And Byers comes back with, well, how come it's on the inside? Countries outside the US have it on the outside. And I think in some ways that exchange to do with the money sort of pins the episode down. Characters, because they're these characters who are maybe a little more flaky than Mulder. They're maybe a little bit more out there with their conspiracy theories, but at the same time, there's just enough in there to, like with the money argument. I mean, no one knows for sure if that sort of thing. It's like, until it's disproven. Even Scully, if she's being honest, even though she thinks it's total rubbish, if she's being honest, she couldn't say 100%. Then it's not true. In the case of the money one, there is a hint of credibility of it, because they do back it up with some good arguments. Have grey areas throughout the episode when it comes to characters and their motivations, and it's a good debut for the lone gunman, and it's an even better episode for Deep Throat. He is the MVP of the episode. Ryan's really good. The atmosphere, the mood. It's really well paced and plotted, and it sort of definitely builds on a lot of the mythology we've had so far in the show. So one of the strongest episodes of the first season. And actually, when I come to ranking it, it's quite easy. It's going in at number 3, just underneath Ice and just Beneath the Sea, because they're set in stone, I think, as X-Files classics. But this is such an important episode and so well written. 3 with a bullet, I'm quite confident of that with this episode. So I've rambled on long enough. Episode 17 of the first season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Donation button for my PayPal account. So if you just want to support the channel a little bit, as little as you like, to keep up the support, that would be really great. I'll be back with more X-Files soon. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.